Good morning. This is Taylor Johnson here. I'm with Patrick Tangney at Logan Title, and we're here today to talk about certificates of occupancy. Good morning, Patrick.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for your time.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks for asking.
So, what is a certificate of occupancy?
Sure. Well, a certificate of occupancy is it's a piece of paper, but to get that piece of paper, the jurisdiction that the property is in has certain inspections that they need to do to make sure, essentially, that it's safe for occupancy.
Okay.
There's different levels of occupancy. There's residential occupancy where one would cook, stay overnight, sleep. There's
Right.
commercial occupancy, like this space where you
Like
just
an office,
run a business out
It's
of, not essentially
9 to 5 daytime type
Right.
stuff. Yep.
May have what the District or Maryland or Virginia call a higher load of people coming in and out, capacity of 12 or 45 or 75 folks coming in and out. So there's really two different types of buildings that certificates of occupancy apply to, one residential and then two commercial.
Okay. So my business is primarily on the residential side, so let's focus on that.
Yep.
Who needs it? Does every homeowner need a certificate of occupancy?
No. As a matter of fact, that's a common misnomer on a lot of people's part. The certificate of occupancy in DC, Maryland, and Virginia are not issued for single-family homes. There's only certificate of occupancies issued for 2 or more units.
I see.
So a lot of people, when they buy a new build single-family home, are asking if we've seen the certificate of occupancy, and it's often our response that the jurisdiction won't issue one for a single-family home. But that doesn't mean that there aren't building permits that need to be pulled, inspected, and closed out.
Right.
We, as a title company, don't research that. That's not a title issue.
Okay.
That's one thing I would like to stress to your clients and consumers.
Always look at permits.
Is that you should always look at permits to make sure they were pulled properly, inspected, and closed out. And in the District of Columbia, there's a website called Scout.
Right.
You can go to Scout, put in the property address, and there will be a option on the menu rail to choose building permits, certificates of occupancies, etc. You can click on that, and it'll give you the history of, the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC. The framing, the building is called mechanical, I believe, but all 4 of those areas,
should have permits.
Particularly
if it's a new build or a renovation.
Right. For 2 or more units, there should be a certificate of occupancy registered with the District of Columbia or Maryland, or Virginia. And if you think about it, a certificate of occupancy is just giving the buyer assurance that it's safe to live there and safe to operate that property in that category. So, for example,
because most of those are going to be some kind of a rental, and you want to be sure that your rental is safe.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Now, I will say that single-family homes, condominiums, especially new build condominiums, all condominiums
have to have a C of O.
But
that's more than really. So you're buying one condominium.
You're buying one condominium,
but it's in
an envelope of a building.
2 or more. Right.
Right. And the district has had an interesting history on issuing C of Os for condominiums. And
interesting in a bad way?
Well, interesting in that, again, that's not a title issue. So, back in 2017, 16, a lot of these builders were putting a lot of condominium units on the market. They were being bought. They can be put under contract as soon as the tax office gives a lot and square number, but they cannot be occupied until there's a certificate of occupancy. And back in the day, and maybe even today, I don't want to say disparaging comments about the Department of Buildings and DCRA, but the certificate of occupancy is the last step that a builder developer has to take to make sure that the buyer can occupy, stay overnight in that condominium unit. And that usually, for some reason, has always been delayed in our experience. All the permits have been closed out and uninspected, but then I don't know if it used to go to a different area in that office to be inspected for a certificate of occupancy, or if there's different criteria. It seems that there are different criterias for the certificate of occupancy than the other for just building permits. But in our experience,
I had one just recently that we were under contract without the certificate of occupancy. It was supposed to come in 2 weeks. We had a 6-week settlement, so we thought we'd be fine. We had to delay another 4 weeks, and we still didn't have it. And my understanding of that whole process was that it was a different inspector, different department. I had one up in Baltimore where the inspector asked the seller to open the walls up to look inside because maybe the permits hadn't been closed properly or something.
I do think, and it's a good thing in the big scheme of things, that it probably is a different area of the office of the Department of Buildings that comes and inspects.
So no sleight of hand type stuff.
Right.
Greasing of the palms.
And, nowadays, a lot of developers and builders can hire third-party inspectors to do the inspection and close out the permit.
Okay.
So it's the certificate of occupancy, you cannot hire a third party. It only has to be an inspector from the District of Columbia, like you said, to make sure everything really was done properly. And those third-party inspectors that might have given the thumbs up on the electrical, plumbing, HVAC, whatever, really do have a relatively high assumption that it's safe to live there. So yeah, we have been up against, sales where the certificate of occupancy has not been issued and it's delayed and delayed and delayed. We've had some folks, most lenders, I will interject, won't let a buyer buy unless there's a certificate of occupancy.
Right. They won't close the...
They won't close the loan.
Yep.
And nowadays, I know, I've heard through the grapevine that GCAR and DCAR have actually been trying to make that a contractual requirement before it sells. Because
before settlement.
Some have sold.
It really should be.
And if an individual were to move in to that unit, one, the district could fine you.
And you probably couldn't get insurance properly.
And if it hasn't been...
And if there's something that happens to you or your tenant,
that's worst
a real
part.
issue.
Yeah. So we had another example just recently, not of a single condominium, but it was a 2-unit here on Capitol Hill where the sellers had a proper certificate of occupancy. They had a basic business license because they rented out their basement, and the buyer went to the Department of Building and DCR to get the certificate of occupancy switched over into their name and a new basic business license, which everyone should and has to do
if you're renting,
in order to rent a basement unit or an accessory dwelling unit out. And the district would not issue a new C of O because the sellers had replaced a skylight, gotten the proper permit, had it inspected even, but the inspector never closed out the permit online.
Oh, really?
So the district's new stance is that everything needs to be, properly permitted, inspected, and closed out before they will automatically switch that certificate of occupancy into the new owner's name.
Wow.
Luckily, the district has been kind as far as working with the new owners to come and get it inspected and get the proper paperwork done. There was nothing wrong with the skylight. It was properly done. It just was a paperwork drill that the last little effort hadn't been made to...
They never ticked the right box.
Right. And, in our experience, and this is just a lot of hearsay, is that a lot of developers that hire these third-party inspectors, will get a little postcard from the inspector and forget to then.
Oh, you just check off the boxes on the postcard?
And they forget to register that with the Department of Building. And that is a step that's necessary. And DC is going to start, holding everybody, not just builders, but sellers, more accountable to that. So my one public service announcement is, if you are having work done at your home and it is a 2-unit or more, make sure those permits are properly inspected and closed out.
Yeah.
Because if you go to sell the home,
you've got a problem.
You could have a problem. And that's why buyers should also check that Scout website to make sure you're going to be able to get a C of O in your name, that all the permits that have been pulled have been properly inspected and closed out.
So now you've mentioned accessory dwelling units. So if I know that those are handled a little bit differently from a proper 2-unit, right? So if I have a property in DC and I'm living in it, by right, I can have an accessory dwelling unit. However, if I move out and I turn both places into rentals, then it's treated very differently. Now I need 2 units, separate meters, all that sort of stuff. With the accessory dwelling unit, I don't. Right? And that's not title stuff either.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say,
do I need a certificate of occupancy if I live in with a accessory dwelling unit?
Technically, no. If it's in this case, it sounds like it's a single family home by definition of the district. And you can have a roommate that lives in your basement that has, a proper inspected and closed out permit for a hot plate or dishwasher or whatever might be in that basement unit. The district looks at that as a roommate situation. It's a single family home. It never had a C of O.
Okay.
And if you were to occupy the top unit and then move out, it would still be a roommate situation. There's a laundry list of criteria to get a certificate of occupancy for a basement rental unit. And then my go-to is rentmybasementdc.org. They've got the list. It's, like you said, more difficult than most people realize, because you do need a separate HVAC. You do need fire protection. You do need egress for safety if a fire breaks out. Minimum ceiling height, a lot of safety requirements are made before the district will recognize that basement as a separate rental for C of O purposes.
And that egress is an easy one to notice, and I find that a lot when I'm looking at properties with people that were in basement units, and the bedroom has this tiny little window that
you couldn't get out.
Even a cat might have trouble climbing through,
Right. That's not
and that's not going to be illegal. You have to be able, as a full person,
to get out of
that space. Now, if there's a door to the outside in that bedroom, that's okay.
Yep.
But the idea is that if there's a fire or something that's blocking the normal exit, you need an alternative.
Right. I just because we renovated our basement, and I believe it's 40 inches from the ground is where the windowsill has to be.
That's the
anything
minimum,
higher, a person with disabilities might have a difficult time getting out.
Right.
So, but going back to the certificate of occupancy, and just to touch on the commercial for a second, just so people are aware, because there are mixed units, like this building, for example, is commercial on the first floor and we have residential on the top floor.
Okay.
So even though it's one residential, we still needed a certificate of occupancy, and it specifically states what each are used for. The upper is residential, and it's been inspected. This one is commercial, which really says, if we have our max number of people allowed in this space and a fire were to break out, everybody could get out safely. The sprinklers would suppress. So there are occasions where you'll hit a mixed use building.
Right.
And all mixed use buildings need a certificate of occupancy as well. You see a lot of condo buildings now with commercial on the first floor,
Right.
and residential on the top
Right.
floor. So you'll see that. But anytime you change the use, you have to get a new C of O that gives you the use code, it's called.
Got it.
It's a tax use code, but it's still used by the Department of Buildings. So yeah, I know we here and you are more focused on residential, but just thought I'd add that about the commercial.
Well, it could be like someday this building is going to be for sale, and somebody could buy it to live upstairs and rent below. So that's a residential in a way.
Right? Yeah.
And there are lots of buildings actually in DC that are like that, where there's an apartment above and a store below.
Yeah.
That was, the way that things were built a long time ago. I have a place myself that's a former store with a apartment above.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So I would say that the key takeaways then from what I hear from you is, like, first of all, if you're looking at a place that is newly renovated or newly built, make sure you're looking at your permits. Check out Scout and make sure the permits are drawn and closed. Make sure you have the certificate of occupancy before you settle. I had a disaster in Baltimore with one of those that came after settlement. Won't go into that story. And make sure it's the proper type of certificate, right? So.
Absolutely. There'll be a use code on that certificate, a number of units on that certificate of occupancy. But like new condominium buildings will have a master C of O with like 41 units. And then each individual unit also has a certificate of occupancy, because developers, for the most part, will, finish a floor, a couple floors, get the C of Os for each unit as they move up or move down, however they decide to do it. So you should have a C of O for your individual unit before you settle and before you go in to put your bed in there. Yeah. Some folks were, they want to get in. I know they're on deadlines, but it's a safety issue that I highly recommend you be patient on.
It requires patience. Because you're at the mercy of the developer, who is at the mercy of the inspector.
Right.
Yeah.
It always seems to be the long pole in the tent, but again, I don't want to say disparaging comments about the Department of Building. It's just hearsay.
I'm sure they have not enough procedures, as most government agencies are.
Yeah, could very well be.
Okay, well, Patrick, again, is with Logan Title. And if you have any questions about title or insurance or anything like that, please reach out to Logan Title. Patrick would be happy to help you. I'll put his contact information below. And I'm Taylor Johnson with Keller Williams Capital Properties. I'm here to be a resource for you. Please reach out to me. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel so that other people like you can find it as well. Patrick, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Taylor.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye now. Okay.